How's it going, guys? My name is Ben Manlin, and today for my honors final project for Greek and Roman mythology, I'm going to be diving into Myth and Modernity, which is Ovid's Metamorphosis and Greco-Roman mythology incorporated into modern graphic design. So I grew up a big collegiate sports fan, and with that, I always paid deep attention to logos and branding that came with these different schools, and I kind of wanted to dive into which of these logos and brands have aspects that are pulled from Ovid's Metamorphosis and Greek and Roman mythology that we've learned about in this class this year. So I did a deep dive and discovered a few known and unknown schools that use big aspects from mythology. So these are going to be characters and symbols from Ovid's Metamorphosis and Greco-Roman mythology that are tied into different collegiate logos around the United States. So the first school that I found, or at least the one that I thought was the most interesting that I didn't originally know about, was Pennsylvania Western University, California. Their mascot is the Vulcans. If you don't know, Vulcan is the Roman god of fire, volcanoes, deserts, and metalworking. He appears in books 2, 4, 6, 9, 12, and 13 in Ovid's Metamorphosis. In book 2, he crafted Helios's chariot that Phaethon would later crash. In book 4, he discovers the affair between his wife Venus and Mars. He would put a net around them and expose them to the other gods. In book 9, he is credited with creating the bronze bulls that Jason would have to tame in the search for the Golden Fleece. And then in book 12, he's credited with forging the armor for Achilles. So overall, I really didn't know that Vulcan was a mascot for any colleges in the United States. And looking at Pennsylvania Western University, California's branding, I really like how they incorporated one of the Greco-Roman gods into their branding and made it their mascot. So for another school that I found with this type of branding, the University of California, San Diego's mascot was the Tritons. Triton is a sea god and the son of Neptune. He appears in books 1, 2, and 13 of Ovid's Metamorphosis. In book 1, he probably is the biggest part that he's going to be shown in Metamorphoses, where when Jupiter unleashes a great flood to punish humanity, Neptune summons Triton. Triton would later blow his conch shell and make the waters recede off the land and kind of save everyone. In book 2, he's mentioned when Vulcan crafts these doors for the Palace of the Sun, and a mural depicts a scene that includes the image of Triton. Overall, Triton's a very powerful character, and I think a lot of people have seen his trident, the three-pronged spear, in other aspects of branding. So yeah, the Tritons are a very big part in collegiate branding as they take place for the University of California, San Diego. And they're also the mascot for UMSL, the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Same exact thing, the three-pronged trident representing Triton, the sea god, and the son of Neptune. So I thought it was interesting that Tritons have such ties into Ovid's Metamorphosis, Greco-Roman mythology, and are also a mascot for multiple schools in the United States. So another college that I had no idea that had mythological branding was State University of New York at Purchase. So when you're looking at the Panthers mascot, you wouldn't originally think that it has anything to do with Ovid's Metamorphosis or Greco-Roman mythology, but I did a little deeper diving and figured out that the Panthers' name is Perseus. Perseus is a hero and the sun god of Jupiter. He appears in books 4 and 5 in Ovid's Metamorphosis. Perseus is probably the main character in 4 and 5, as he's the hero that slays Medusa, turns the Titan Atlas into a mountain, slays the Hydra, creates coral, has a couple battles, and eventually becomes the king of his own city. So I thought it was interesting that State University at New York has a panther that's named Perseus, and I looked it up, and it is direct ties back into Perseus from Metamorphoses and Greco-Roman mythology. So I thought that it was interesting that their branding is still tied into mythological aspects. So a little bit more well-known branding that has to do with Greco-Roman mythology is the University of Southern California. They're the Trojans, and the Trojan soldiers were Greek warriors who fought in the Trojan War and appear in Book 12 of Ovid's Metamorphosis. In Book 12, Paris is a Trojan prince, and he abducts Helen from her homeland, and that pretty much starts and commences the whole Trojan War. that is talked about in Ovid's Metamorphosis, along with a lot of other stories that are tied into that war in Greco-Roman mythology. I think a lot of people knew that USC's branding was tied into mythological stories, but yeah, it's the Trojans, and there also are a couple other schools that are tied into the Trojan identity. The University of Troy is also the Trojans, same exact characters from the Trojan War, Book 12 of Ovid's Metamorphosis. But I also thought it was interesting that Troy University is named after the city of Troy, which Helen was abducted to and brought to in Metamorphosis and other mythological stories. So I thought it was interesting that the Troy University Trojans were so deeply tied into these stories of mythology. Another Another school that has Greco-Roman mythology and ties into Ovid's Metamorphosis is University of Central Florida. So their mascot is the Knights, but with a little research, I figured out that the emblem of their school is actually a Pegasus. The Pegasus is a winged horse that was born from Medusa's blood in Book 4 after Perseus slayed Medusa. The Pegasus is also mentioned in Book 5 for creating the Hippocrane spring by striking the ground with its hooves. So overall, the Pegasus has a lot of ties in Ovid's Metamorphosis and also is just a very known creature of Greco-Roman mythology. And yeah, I had no idea that it was a mascot, or not a mascot, but a branding of the University of Central Florida. Another school that has branding based on characters and monsters from Greco-Roman mythology is Elon University. They are the Phoenix. The Phoenix is a mythological bird that symbolizes rebirth and immortality, which pretty much is because it is a creature that reproduces and renews itself without a mate, and after about 500-year lifespan, it dies and then is just reborn in the same spot. So I think it's a pretty cool mascot for the University of Elon to choose. And it's mentioned in Metamorphosis in Book 15 as Ovid talks about kind of what it is. And overall, I think it's a pretty known creature in the Greco-Roman mythological world. Another school that uses aspects of Ovid's Metamorphosis and the stories of Greco-Roman mythology is University of Detroit Mercy. Their mascot is the Titans. I was originally thinking like the Tennessee Titans, like on a sports note, but I was like, I'm sure there's another school that has the Titans as their branding. So of course, Detroit Mercy is what it was. The Titans were a pre-Olympian group of deities that ruled the universe and appeared in many of the early books in Ovid's Metamorphosis. There's a lot of stories of them creating the Olympian gods and kind of just like creating the universe as it was. So, like I said, there's a lot of ties of Titans back into mythology and Ovid's Metamorphosis. So, starting to get into less of the characters and more of the symbols in Greco-Roman mythology, Marquette University is the Golden Eagles. If you didn't know, the Golden Eagle is the symbolic animal of Zeus and appears in multiple books in Ovid's Metamorphosis, along with just being a known symbol in Greco-Roman mythology. Another school that uses a symbolic animal as their mascot is the St. Peter's University Peacocks. The peacock is the symbolic animal of Juno and appears in books 1 and 2 of Ovid's Metamorphosis, along with obviously being a prominent animal in Greco-Roman mythology. So kind of just to wrap this all up, I wanted to make a list of college mascots that also happen to be objects and animals that mortals were transformed into in Ovid's Metamorphoses. So, for example, I put cow, a tree, a stag, a bear, a spider, and I listed below it the characters in Ovid's Metamorphosis that were turned into these animals that are now college mascots. So, it's interesting to me how many characters were transformed into animals or objects that are now adopted and are the logos and main branding behind colleges that you know and love today. So the final takeaways behind all of this is that I thought it was very interesting that while we're all just college students going about our day-to-day at these schools, the backbone of these brandings, mascots, and logos for all these different colleges are based off of stories from Ovid's Metamorphosis and other aspects of Greco-Roman mythology. So while it may seem so far in the past and maybe not a huge aspect of society. It really is, as these different mascots are direct results of these stories from Greco-Roman mythology and Ovid's Metamorphoses. Here are my sources. Obviously, I used Ovid's Metamorphoses, the book, from all these stories and pulled all these different characters and symbols from these books. I also use Google AI to look up what schools have what mascots, and ChatGPT to kind of do the same thing and sort my information. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and thank you so much.